All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are really digging into something big, a piece of legislation that's trying to, completely rebuild the foundation of housing in America. It's the 21st Century Road to Housing Act, and it's got its sights set on some of the toughest problems we're all facing with housing affordability and just access.
Yeah, what if? That's the core question here, right? And this legislation, it's really trying to provide some answers. We're talking about a huge package of reforms. It's got a massive scope. It's going after everything from homelessness in our major cities all the way to the fight to keep affordable housing alive in our small rural towns.
Okay, so here's our game plan. First up, we're going to look at how this whole thing empowers local solutions. Then we'll jump into some new protections for homeowners and see what's happening to revitalize rural America. After that, we'll talk about pathways to opportunity and then wrap it all up by looking at the road ahead. Sound good? Let's get into it.
So, let's start with this first section. Right away, you can see this is a huge shift in thinking. We're moving away from that rigid, one-size-fits-all approach from the top down. Instead, the whole idea is to put the power and the tools directly into the hands of local communities so they can tackle their own unique housing challenges.
Okay, so one of the key tools to make this happen is something called a community land trust, or a CLT. Now look, CLTs aren't exactly new, but this act, it gives them some real muscle. The concept is actually pretty cool. Think of it like this. The trust, the CLT, owns the land itself, but a family, they own the actual house that sits on that land. By splitting ownership like that, the CLT can basically lock in the home's affordability, not just for the first family that buys it, but for every family that comes after. It's a way to create permanent affordability.
And this is how they get that muscle I was talking about. The Act gives CLTs what are called preemptive purchase options. That's a bit of jargon, but what it really means is they get first dibs. They get to be first in line to buy certain properties when they go up for sale. And this is a total game changer because it means they can swoop in, grab a property, do any necessary repairs, and then sell it to a qualified family from their wait list. It pulls that house right out of the speculative market and keeps it affordable pretty much forever.
Now, another huge part of empowering local solutions is tackling homelessness. For years, local leaders have been hitting this wall, right? They've got these really rigid federal funding rules, these spending caps, that just don't match up with what's actually happening on their streets.
So, the solution here is a brand new waiver process. You can think of it as a kind of fast track. It lets communities raise their hand and say, hey, we need more flexibility here. If a city can show they have a real pressing need and, crucially, a solid plan to fix it, they can get a waiver to go beyond those spending caps. It's all about making the system quicker, more nimble, and getting that help where it's needed most.
All right, moving on to our next section. This part of the Act really zooms in on protecting families when things get tough. We're talking about creating new safety nets for a couple of groups that can be in a really vulnerable spot: military families and the heirs of homeowners. And these reforms are they're just common sense, right? For our military members, getting deployed or having to change stations shouldn't put their housing at risk. This just makes sure it doesn't. And for families, when you're grieving the loss of a loved one, the last thing you should worry about is losing your home. This change lets an heir take over the house and its responsibilities while keeping its affordable status intact. It's really about stopping life's biggest challenges from turning into a full-blown housing crisis. Okay, so now let's shift gears a little and talk about rural America, because this legislation dedicates a huge chunk to it. We're talking about a major overhaul designed to preserve and improve housing outside of the big cities. It's all about modernizing these really critical programs that so many rural communities depend on.
So there's this ticking clock problem in a lot of rural housing. You have these affordable apartment buildings, and when the original loan on them is finally paid off, poof, the requirement to keep the rents affordable can just disappear overnight. So what this act does is it creates a much longer runway to prepare for that. Owners get a heads up a full 4 years out, and every single tenant gets a notice 2 years in advance. It gives everyone time to breathe and figure out a plan.
And to make that plan work, the Rural Housing Service gets a whole new toolkit. Look at this. They now have the power to do things like slash interest rates, defer loan payments, or even lock in rental assistance for another 20 years. These aren't just little adjustments. These are powerful financial tools to keep these homes safe, sound, and affordable for the long haul.
And check this out. A simple but really impactful change. The Act literally doubles the maximum amount for loans and grants for fixing up farm housing. Now, I know going from $7,500 to $15,000 might not sound like a lot in Washington, D.C., but let me tell you, for a family out in the country who needs a new roof or a safe water well, that is a world of difference. It's huge.
All right, let's talk about opportunity. The next section is all about a program called Moving to Work.
The whole goal here is to give public housing agencies more freedom, more room to experiment, to help their residents get on a path to financial independence.
So moving to work, or MTW for short, you can think of it as a lab, right? It's where the top-performing housing agencies get to be scientists. They can test out new ideas, try different approaches, and cut through a bunch of the usual red tape. And the headline here is that this act is making that lab even bigger.
How? Well, it's authorizing a brand new group or cohort of these agencies, and it has this really specific name, the Economic Opportunity and Pathways to Independence Cohort. It's going to bring in up to 25 more high performers, and their one job, their single focus, is to figure out the best ways to help families become financially self-sufficient.
And this chart, this shows you the superpower they get. See, a normal public housing agency, a PHA, can use its funding for one thing, housing. That's it. But these new MTW agencies, they can take up to 5% of that money and use it for other things that help residents succeed. We're talking job training, childcare, financial counseling, things that support the whole person, not just their need for a roof over their head.
Now, it's really important to know that this flexibility isn't a free-for-all. There are guardrails. You can see them right here. These agencies still have to make sure most of the families they help are very low income. They still have to keep their housing in good shape, and they have to help the same number of families. So yeah, the goal is to innovate, but it's not at the expense of their fundamental mission.
Okay, so we've walked through all these different parts: empowering local groups, protecting homeowners, revitalizing rural America. So let's pull the camera back. What's the big picture here? What does all this add up to?
Well, when you really look at the whole thing, it's pretty clear this is not about small tweaks around the edges. This is a fundamental rethinking of how we do housing policy in this country. There's a common thread running through everything we've talked about, whether it's the community land trusts, the rural housing reforms, or that moving to work expansion. The big idea is a shift towards solutions that are more flexible, more local, and honestly just more responsive to people's actual lives.
So, at the end of the day, this legislation puts a whole new toolkit on the table. It's a more modern, more flexible set of instruments for our cities, states, and nonprofits to work with. But, and this is the big question, having the tools is one thing, using them effectively is another. The real test is going to be how these ideas are put into practice, on the ground, in the years ahead. And that's the chapter that's yet to be written.